Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PBSE Podcast. Steve Moore and Mark Castleman here, and we are coming at you with episode number 285 today. Quote-unquote performance anxiety is creating a wall between me and my betrayed partner. What advice do you have? It's a little bit different from what we've addressed recently, which is a good shift. We like kind of bouncing around all things sex addiction. And this is definitely an element that, while talked about less, can be important, not just because of the sexual performance in that area of intimacy, because there are many pieces to that, many moving parts. We'll talk about that. But because this can also tie in significantly with the partner as well, and issues ranging around everything from love and connection to acceptance to safety and everything in between for both people in the relationship. So with that in mind, I will go ahead and read this. It's not very long, so I'll go through this quickly here. This is from an addict. It says, thanks for all you do in speaking to us addicts. I really gain a lot of insight from your podcast, especially hearing from all the betrayed partners. And we appreciate that. I'm an addict with a little more than 2 years of sobriety and recovery. Recently, an issue with sex has raised its head again in our marriage that I'm at a loss for how to handle. Ever since I became sexually active in college, I've had issues with performance anxiety. Obviously, I'm diagnosing myself here, so I don't have the best perspective, but I feel much of it had to do with the amount of porn I watched. Through porn, I learned to relate to women and sex in a dysfunctional and selfish manner that in the end, I chose over reality. I don't want to make it seem as if I'm a victim. In the end, I chose all of that. These problems continued into my marriage, but now add in the cocktail of lying and gaslighting, and sex between my wife and I was often a flashpoint when I could not perform. It became an indicator that something was wrong, which there was, but also I learned a deeper level of shame surrounding my performance because of the level of anger my wife would get to. Now in recovery, the issue hasn't come up for a while until recently, when I had a spell of the performance feedback loop happening again. Lots of accusations occurred, along with what he considers to be emotional abuse. The issue, he doesn't specify what that means, but we can imagine some of that. The issue centers around expectations. When I put on myself the pressure to perform, I'm no longer in a frame of mind to give and only focused on my physical readiness and the desire not to disappoint, so as not to feel shame afterwards. I get stuck in a feedback loop of, quote, I don't think about pink elephants, unquote, but now that I said that, I'm immediately thinking about, you guessed it, pink elephants, right? I feel like the more I try to get out of the quicksand, the more stuck I get. Now, on top of the feedback loop I'm in, add in all the relationship trauma I've caused my wife, and the situation can quickly devolve into week-long struggle fests. What advice can you guys give here?
Yeah, we run into this a lot over the last 20 plus years of doing this. We ourselves have experienced some of this. And I think, the first thing I want to really stress, Stevie, you and I talked about this. We can empathize with the physical, the psychological, the emotional, the relational trauma, and I'm using that word, trauma, in all those areas that performance anxiety can create.
Yeah.
It's both for the addict and the betrayed partner. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that for a minute. The addict that sent in this question, I applaud the fact that he owned his side of the street. He talked about how he built these, sexual and pornography and self-sex habits, earlier in life and through college. And he realizes that he didn't say it this way, but we refer to him, altering his, quote, arousal template. What does the wiring in the brain look like when it comes to sexual arousal? How do I get aroused? What arouses me? And we build so much dysfunctional wiring in this regard through sexual and pornography addiction.
Yes.
And now, I mean, what I remember years ago, we started receiving, when we had started doing online programs globally, we would get a lot of submissions from guys who said, "Hey, this is not a moral issue for me. This is not some religious thing. Don't try to make it all about that." We'd have guys who would reach out and say, "I just simply can't get aroused with a regular woman anymore. Will you guys help me?"
Mm.
Right? You hear about that more and more and more with how pornography and sexual addiction and all the things that are included in that, which is a lot, has some radical impacts on our healthy, normal arousal wiring.
Yeah.
He talks about how this, he brought this into his relationship with his partner. So that's a very big part of this. And then take that very real, the neuroscience, neuropsychology, the biology that's going on, and now add in all of the psychological and emotional and relational stress that he describes, right? Expectations, pain that his partner is experiencing. And Steve, you can talk about in a minute what all this looks like from the side of the betrayed partner, right? Because what did he share? He says, basically his cocktail of lying and gaslighting and sex all mixed together with his wife was often a flashpoint when I could not perform. And it became an indicator that something was wrong, which there was. But also I learned a deeper level of shame surrounding my performance because of the level of anger my wife would get to. So maybe you can talk about what this means to a betrayed partner when her addict partner, quote, can't perform, and all the layers of meaning that can take on for a betrayed partner.
Well, and I'll just say one before I do that, I'll just say one more thing about the addict side of this. I mean, what other podcast do you get this vulnerable? Okay. So sexual performance issues have been a thing for me for several years. I'm 40. What am I now? 42? 42. And I mean, I can look back as a guy who's been very sexually, let's just say, in tune with the physicality of sex, right? Since I was very young. And I've watched that kind of evolve over time. And from an emotional perspective, performance issues for a guy can be difficult for any guy.
Yeah.
But I can speak to what many addicts who struggle with this. I felt this way, and I've heard this from many over the years. I'll give you the specific phrase I used to think when this would happen before I was able to address those issues physically and otherwise, which we're going to talk about. It would kind of triple down on the shame for me because what it would say, I mean, because one thing that my brain always prided itself on was, okay, I may be a total ass of a husband. This is again my shame voice talking, right? I'm labeling myself. I may be a total ass of an husband. I may be a total jerk. I may not have lots of friends. I may do all these things wrong, but damn it, I am good at sex. And when that started to happen, so in other words, I was very toxically kind of invested in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, this is one of the few things I can do right. And when that started to become a problem, I was like, oh my gosh. Right now, if I can't do this, like literally, I remember thinking, what do I even contribute at this point? Right now, that's not accurate thinking, but we very much resonate with where an addict can go there. So, just kind of throwing that out. But Mark, you're absolutely right. I mean, when it comes to safety and trust issues, right? I mean, if we look at the emotional side of this for a partner, I think back on couples that I've worked with over the years where this comes up, right? And then you can hear it in his story, right? I mean, it's very common for partners when they, for example, put out a bid for sexual connection or, put themselves out there and say, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? And he either declines or expresses less of an interest or isn't able to get sexually aroused. For a partner who's experienced betrayal in the past, especially like he said, where there's been a lot of gaslighting around it, why? Why is he not aroused? The guy's a sex addict, right? I'm talking in the lens of a partner right now. The partner also sometimes kind of buys into that thinking. This is the one thing he's always been
Mm-hmm.
super, super into,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, why is this not happening? Is he sexually finding satisfaction somewhere else? Am I no longer attractive to him? Am I not pretty? Um, is he carrying around other stuff? Maybe he's relapsed, and so he's kind of avoiding it for me. He's avoiding being sexual for me because he's scared it's going to come out or I'm going to find out, or right. These are all things I have heard from partners over and over and over again. And of course, we as addicts, what have we done in the past? We have oftentimes, too often, as he described, we have gaslit, we've minimized. Honey, what's wrong? You don't want to have sex? Oh no, I do. I just can't because of these reasons.
Yeah,
Or,
it was just a hard day. I'm just a little tired, or
yep,
right, not divulging. Well, I masturbated 3 times to pornography this morning.
yes. Or it could just be the other side. I have been, and we didn't know it at the time, right? But I have been losing sexual interest, but it's because of my own shame issues and because I've altered my arousal template and increasingly disconnected it from reality and connected it to the never-ending, ever-deepening, non-authentic world of fantasy,
Right.
right? And so there's all these other reasons why that we give, whether it's intentionally or not. And so, of course, when the addict says what? No, I don't know what you're talking about. What does the partner say? Here we have again, as so often it comes up in addiction, it is, I call it the seventh circle of hell version of the boy who cried wolf.
Yes.
Honey, there's really nothing going on. And what does she think? Bullshit. I have heard that 100. It's almost more triggering to hear that from many partners. This is the same song and dance this guy gave me years ago before he got into recovery. Well, now what's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, this has become so severe. I've had clients over the years where the betrayed partner became so triggered by this issue, right? The lack of the ability to get and keep an erection, the inability to even get aroused or stay aroused. I've had betrayed partners who have said, if he doesn't climax and ejaculate, that's a deal breaker for this relationship from now on.
Yes.
We're done. Right? Because what does that signify to her as the traumatized, betrayed partner? If he doesn't, he was able to do that on command for years or decades. And now, if he can't do that with me, then this relationship is over. Why? Because of everything that means behind the scenes. Right? This becomes very severe to a complex, traumatized, betrayed partner's brain. And so there's a lot of really legitimate and critical issues going on here. And as we looked at this couple, the need to be confronted and addressed, not just the surface issue. I'm going to call it a surface issue of the performance anxiety or inability to quote perform, but being very vulnerable and open to get to the place where they can start to explore what's going on under the layers of this. Right? I would love to see this couple, and I don't hear it, to get to the place where they could actually, here's a word that sounds impossible. It did to me early on, collaborate about this issue. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done with regard to this addict and the betrayed partner, individual work, before they could ever get to the collaboration place in this regard. Steve, what is it about? We engage in sexual intimacy with each other, but when it comes to talking about it, getting raw and vulnerable about it, having an open, collaborative, team-based, conversation and effort around it, stuff just falls to pieces, doesn't it?
Well, and it does, and it becomes so volatile. And again, I think and it makes perfect sense why now, because what do you have? You have what we talk about so often on the program in different lights, right? Which is the fact that there is an ongoing, never-ending paradox in humanity. I was talking to I had my hair cut for Father's Day for the first time in 20 years. Kid you not? I've cut my own hair for 20 years, so I went to a hair person.
Wow.
My wife wanted me to do a new hairstyle, so that's what I'm rocking today, for better or worse. And I'm very open when I talk to people and they ask me what I do. So we got in this conversation. This is one of the things that came up is even for the average population, right? Sex is in my estimation, the most universally applicable topic on the planet. Everybody either came from sex or is having it or both.
Yeah.
We either originated there, we're engaging in it, or both. But it is also hands down simultaneously the most reluctant topic, an awkward topic for people across the board, generally speaking. And we won't get into that today, but when you take that element that just exists with people, right, for all the reasons that it
Yeah,
does,
in general.
And then you add on all of the safety issues and the fact that this has been a bad place in the past. For many partners and addicts, this would be the emotional equivalent of a veteran going back and visiting the battleground where he lost his leg.
That's right.
Even though the place itself is a good place, and this is a good analogy, I think, because even though the place itself is a good place, maybe it's a really exotic locale, maybe it's very pretty, maybe it's very picturesque. For those people involved, what do they think of when they get there? They don't think of the palm trees. They don't think of the sun. They don't think of the pretty beach. What do they think of? My leg got blown off over there.
Mm-hmm.
I shot my buddy on accident right there. Right. And so it's a place that's very scary because bad crap went down here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And add all that together and everything we've just talked about. Is it any wonder that it becomes difficult?
Of course. I mean, it feels the environment, the sexual dialogue for many couples feels downright hostile because it has been.
Downright hostile. Yeah, it's a very good description of that. Hey, everybody. PBSE Podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. Mark and I found ourselves in that place. Messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today.
As I thought about this, having said all of that, there's another issue that we need to confront directly. And I'm passionate about this. I know Steve is. There is a cultural expectation that's been going on for decades. I don't know, maybe for the whole history of the world. This whole cultural sexual box that has all these expectations and all of these stereotypes and all of this stuff attached to it, this sexualized culture. We battle with that whether we know it or not as coupleships. We bring it into the bedroom. I will give you the perfect example. I just experienced this like a week ago. I was watching I like watching old TV programs like from 30, 40, 50 years ago. Watching some old program, some old Western or something. Here comes this commercial. And here's what the commercial looked like. There's an older couple. They look like maybe they're in their mid 50s, late 50s, maybe even early 60s. And the man and the woman are sitting on a couch. His head is down in a very shameful posture. Her head is down, and she's even kind of crying and very distraught. And she finally gets up from the couch and just storms out of the room and leaves him sitting on the couch with his head hung in shame.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is going on with this couple? And then the next screen shifts and they're walking down the street, happy, bubbly, talking to each other, embracing each other. Life is fantastic. Their coupleship is absolutely fabulous. And what was it that made the difference? It was a commercial for generic Viagra.
Yeah.
The reason they were on the couch destroyed was because he couldn't get an erect penis.
Yeah.
And their entire, let's just say, 30 years of marriage was on the rocks. And as soon as he was able to get an erect penis, then they're bouncing down the street. Their entire marriage has been healed and everything is fabulous. And I just sat there and I was like, wow, have we really descended into that sexualized, culturized box? Can that be real? And I think, unfortunately, too many have bought into that mindset. And I wonder how much of that is even at play here. Do we allow ourselves as individuals and couples to be boxed in sexually with these crazy stereotypes and these crazy, expectations? And it was one of the most outrageous things I've ever seen in my life. I was just like flabbergasted.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, but you can see again where it happens, right? And why it happens, because we've kind of covered that. So where do we go? Right? Where do we go? We've got this again, using my analogy, right? We're back visiting this place. Again, a place of beauty, a place where lots of good has the capacity to happen, but with this really hard history there.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Well, the key with trauma recovery, we talk about that in other episodes. There are lots of methodologies involving therapy and other things for traumatic recovery or post-trauma recovery, right? Post-traumatic growth. May I say that in a coupleship, one of the most important and potent pieces of post-traumatic growth is evidence-based pursuit. Clinically speaking, this can involve things like the clinical term is exposure therapy. Or even though this has been hard, one of the ways that this is only going to become unhard is if we're willing to try it again, right? If we're willing to recognize that, you know what, those are the stories that happened. Those are the facts as how they happened, but we are different people today, right? In the case of this couple, if I am willing to take him at his word as a partner, he has at least a significant amount of recovery that he's gained over the last 2 years. Can I trust in any of that? Am I willing to look back on the history? Now, of course, I have suspicions today, but am I willing to look back on not just the evidence of my current trauma or my current suspicion? Am I able to ground myself using all the tools we talk about here on the podcast, but also in our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples? Am I able to use those techniques to be able to recognize that, yes, this situation looks highly dangerous for these reasons, but I have also been able to cultivate safety through all of these other things that I have seen over time.
Yeah.
Right? And what else am I seeing with him? Is he different now? Because remember, what does trauma say? What's the trauma response? It's all about trying to help you as a person avoid a repeat of traumatic experiences in the future. So you have to talk to yourself. You have to have a dialogue with yourself. This is part of that post-traumatic growth. It's a part of the therapy process with it. But asking yourself questions like, is this situation genuinely a repeat of the past? And if not, what parts of it are different? How's his attitude, for example, this time around versus previously? How is he responding? How am I different? Part of why I may have, as a partner, for example, responded so toxically or reactively to the past is why I didn't have tools.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about boundaries. I didn't know anything about recovery. I wasn't able to distance myself from his choices or the lack thereof the way I am now. All those skills that you learn about when you join our D2C program for addict spouses and couples. If you haven't tried it, daretoconnectnow.com, guys. You need to get your butts in there. Few places that we could recommend better to find. It's not individual therapy. It's not meant to be. It's damn close for a fraction of the cost. Daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to have you come join us. But the more that I apply those pieces, right, and the more I look at that, can that help to open the door to not again believing what he's saying wholesale, and for him as well, right? For you not to believe what your partner's saying wholesale, but simply open yourselves to the idea that we are different people in some ways. Can the logic that we could handle this differently than we have in the past be possible?
Well, and
Yeah.
we're spending a really deep dive right now in Dare to Connect on what we call the 8 areas of intimacy.
Yeah.
Only one of those is sexual. There's 7 others. And so I would really encourage a couple to look at and say, okay, what has sex come to mean in our relationship?
Yeah.
Is it the be all end all? Do all things live or die in our relationship with regard to what happens in the bedroom? Might we be in a position where we need to take a step back and do a reset? Do we start to go back and maybe we take sex off the table for a while? We talk about sex fasts on here, which we
Yeah.
highly encourage under the direction of a professional, if at all possible. But maybe we need to go back to the basics. How well have we developed our overall intimacy in these other 7 areas? Right? Because what happens in the bedroom is reflective of everything else going on in the relationship. So developing those other 7 areas of intimacy, stepping back to maybe, start dating again, start courting, maybe go back to just holding hands, becoming friends, beginning to build these other areas instead of allowing the sexualized culture, the little box that we've been hemmed into, to say, oh man, nope, what happens in that bedroom, that's the be all end all, and that dictates everything else. Maybe it's time to reverse that and say everything else is really critical, and we're going to work hard to build all of that, and then just allow that to flow into that one area of our intimacy, the sexual. We're going to let that lead out instead of the sexual leading out.
Which
That's,
frankly was haphazard to begin with.
yes,
One of the things that we talk about in Dare to Connect all the time is that sexuality finds its best, most authentic place in a relationship when, contrary to everything you hear in culture, and we just don't give a damn because it is what it is. Sex is never the lead out charger in healthy, long-term, sustainable, authentic relationships. It's just not.
never.
It's an expression and a way of celebrating and growing and filling in the gaps of connection that you lay the brickwork with in all the other areas.
Yep. It's the culmination and celebration and outgrowth of all the other ways we're building intimacy.
Rather than trying to unify all the other bricks of connection in building the house of a relationship, we live in a culture now that tragically upholds this idea that screw the bricks, just make it out of cement, which is just nonsense.
Yeah.
When you seek to make a house out of strictly just emotional cement or sexual cement, you're going to find yourself lacking, and you will find that just like with a building, the base begins. You find that what you're trying to build above is on very shaky ground because what is below is not firmly rooted.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and so what does this do? This takes us back, as Mark said at the beginning, right back to the basics. What are the issues at play underneath? This guy submitted that, there's a lot of toxicity involved. He even called it emotional abuse. Now, again, we don't know anything about that, what that implies, but it's important to, as quickly as possible, get underneath the defensiveness on both sides, the toxicity on both sides, and ask ourselves, behind the behavior, what does this represent?
What is really going on, right? Can you work together, and if with a therapist, whatever you've got to do to create what we would call a safe and collaborative space where you can begin to talk openly, vulnerably, and authentically about what's really going on here. I know I didn't get an erection when we were in the bedroom, but that's not the real issue. What's below all of this? Can we begin to actually give that a voice?
Well,
right?
and along with that, I mean, it's can we give that a voice, but can we look at the other area? Because again, the sexual piece is usually where we identify is oftentimes where in this recovery process issues on the emotional spectrum are identified. Because when you talk about sexual intimacy, think of it like a high stakes poker game. When you're working in all of these other areas, that's at least how Steve's brain does it. I'm Mr. Analogy, as you all know. And when I look at the other areas of my relationship, right? Anytime I'm working in intimacy on any level, there's always a risk, right? There's a risk that I could lose because emotional intimacy is a gamble. There's always the possibility of what the other person does what. If I'm vulnerable, they may not be. If I invest, they might not. If I commit, they may do something to hurt me, right? There's always that emotional risk ever present. But are we doing what we can to stack the deck in our favor? If we're not going through that process in a healthy way on the emotional levels of intimacy and the emotionally tied levels, that's like, you're not practicing, that art on the lower levels, and now you're going to sit down at the high stakes poker table, which is what I look at as the sexual intimacy.
Well,
Everything that happens in the sexual realm is amplified in the relationship. You can build, as we say in D2C all the time, you can build or destroy more in the sexual realm of a relationship than you can in almost any other quicker.
yeah.
There's huge risk and there is huge reward, but there is huge risk. And if you don't have those underpinnings in all the other areas going, that's where you can really lose big
Well, and
anyway.
I'm going to say something. There's probably going to be some listening that are going to bristle to this a bit, but I'm just going to say it because of what Steve just indicated. Right, the bedroom is a place where great connection, the celebration and culmination of all the other things you've been working so hard individually and together to build, all comes together in that space, and it's this beautiful connecting experience. Or it has the potential to be incredibly destructive.
Yeah.
If you as a couple are not doing the other things outside the bedroom that we've been talking about today, you have no business coming together sexually. I'm just going to be bold. You risk the risk, I mean, the damage, the destruction, the divisiveness that you risk coming into that space not prepared. Right? We're just going to go have sex because sex fixes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what you're engaging in. You need to take a step back and really question your approach. Right? Today, well, Steve, you and I've talked about this. For you and me, if we haven't done the work outside the bedroom, and now we come together with our partners sexually, and we realize in that moment that we're not in a good space, that we're looking to take something from that sexual experience that is far more than it could ever deliver or repair, you and I have learned that we will back off. Hey, sweetheart, I'm not in a good space right now. My intention's not right. I've not been doing the work outside of here. I don't feel like we've been very well connected. A lot of that's been my fault. Can we just kind of take a break and let me go do some personal work, and maybe we'll do some other intimate things together and then come back and try this again? Right? That's the mature, responsible, loving, collaborative thing to do. But how often do we just blow all that aside and we just get sexual?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many things that we could talk about with this, guys, right? As always, the podcasts are never long enough. Come on, come extend your stay with us at Dare to Connect. We'd love to have you
Well,
come over.
for example,
Mhm.
a fair while ago, we completed a 27 module advanced course about all things healthy sexuality in a relationship that goes over what we talked about today times 100.
Guys, 27 modules. E-
27
They
modules.
average 45 minutes to an hour in length, each one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of content.
You wonder why we can't answer this question fully in a podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
So lots there. Again, daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to have you come join us. We hope that this has been helpful and at least gives this couple and others a starting point. We sure do honor all of you couples who are engaged in this process. As you can see, difficult pieces can come up in this process, even years into it. In our Dare to Connect program, for example, we have people who are coming in desperate, seeking, like many of you probably listening to the podcast, they've never even heard the term sex addiction till yesterday. They have no idea. They've never heard of betrayal trauma. They're just flooded and overwhelmed. We also have people in there where guys and their partners have been in a place of healthy recovery. He's been sober for years. And Dare to Connect is more of a maintenance program for them. So whether you're in the middle of hardcore remodeling or whether you're in a place of maintenance, Dare to Connect financially and otherwise is a sustainable option to meet needs on both ends.
Yeah.
We hope you'll come join us. As always, if you would like to send us a question to be addressed on the podcast, I think we're about 4 or 5 weeks behind right now on podcasts on questions build up. So it does take a little bit of time to get to those. But you are welcome to always send those as always through the contact form if you go to daretoconnectnow.com. Up at the top of that, which is where you can sign up for the free trial of Dare to Connect. But at the top of there's a little banner that says PBSE Podcast. Just go ahead and click on that. It will take you to the podcast page where at the bottom you can send us a question through the contact form. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Or you could come and join the free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect to get your question answered on Wednesday in our partner session.
That's right. Today was a crazy session in Dare to Connect. As of the day of this filming, yeah, like Mark said, we're in the middle of emotional intimacy and had a pretty, what would you say? Highly interactive session, I guess I'll say, with the guys. Lots of questions, lots of tough stuff that we tackled. And then we're going to do it all again from the partner's perspective. And then on Sunday, or it's not Sunday, excuse me.
Friday, yeah.
On Friday, we come together in the coupleship where everybody's allowed to talk in the session, and we're going to bring it all together. And that's just what we do week to week in the program. So hope you can join us.
Yeah.
Hope you will join us. Yeah, have a great rest of your week. All be safe, be well wherever you are. As of the writing of this, we hope those of you who are watching this currently had a great Father's Day over the weekend. And we will talk to you soon.
Right. Take care.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.